The line doesn't move. That's the first thing you notice. Not the chandeliers dripping gold light across marble so polished it mirrors the ceiling back at itself. Not the silk gowns catching that light like dying stars. Not the guards standing at intervals, so precise they feel mathematical. The line doesn't move. 50 women arranged along the grand hall of Valenmere Palace. Shoulders pulled back. Chins lifted at the exact approved angle. Eyes forward, mostly. And beneath all that careful stillness, beneath the practiced composure of every woman trained to be composed here, they're waiting. You can feel it if you stand in that hall long enough. The specific quality of a room full of people who are pretending not to want something very badly. He hasn't even entered yet. King Alaric Vane moves through doorways the way weather moves through valleys. You feel the pressure change before anything is visible. Heads tilt infinitesimally toward him. Spines adjust. Somewhere near the third pillar from the left, a woman who has been perfectly still for 20 minutes exhales through her nose and presses her fingers into her palms. He doesn't announce himself. He doesn't need to. His boots land on marble with the unhurried certainty of someone who has never once in his life wondered whether a room would accommodate him. The chandeliers seem to burn brighter when he walks beneath them. That's not magic. That's attention. Collective, involuntary, a whole room redirecting its focus so fully that the air itself seems to shift toward him. He walks between the lines. He doesn't touch anyone. He has never needed to. This is the part the court understands. This is the power everyone has learned to arrange their lives around. King Alaric reads desire. Not crudely, not like some simple trick. It comes to him the way temperature comes to skin, ambient, constant, impossible to ignore once you're aware of it. Every person in this hall is broadcasting something beneath the surface of their careful faces. Ambition. Fear. Hunger for proximity to power. Longing for safety, for status, for a particular kind of being seen that the throne can provide. It reaches him like warmth from a fire. Different temperatures, different qualities, but always present. Always readable. He is ruled by this for 11 years. He has never, once, stood in a room and felt nothing from someone standing 10 feet away from him. Until tonight. His step falters. Not visibly. Not enough for anyone watching, and everyone is watching, to clock it as something significant. A fraction of a beat. A breath held half a second longer than usual. But he feels it. Near the gilded pillar at the far edge of the hall, where the light doesn't fully reach and the warmth from the nearest torches dies before it arrives, a woman stands. He looks at her. He waits. Nothing comes back. He looks again. Harder this time. The way you might look at a word you've read 100 times and suddenly cannot parse. Around her, the ambient press of emotion, desire coded into silk and breath and slightly elevated pulse rates. The hall hums with it. From her, nothing. Not hostility. Not numbness. Not even the practiced blankness of someone trained to conceal. Just absence. A space where signal should be. Alaric changes direction. The shift moves through the hall before he reaches her. You watch it travel the way a current travels through water. First the women nearest to him sensing the change in his trajectory, then the adjustment rippling outward, every head tilting in the direction of his new path. All of them realize, at once, where he's going. None of them can see anything remarkable about where he's going. They watch anyway. He stops directly in front of her. Up close, the details refuse to cooperate with narrative. She isn't strikingly beautiful. She isn't notably plain. She wears fabric of a muted, faded blue that whispers of travel and practicality rather than court display. The seams have been stressed and re-stressed. Her hands, folded at her waist, show white at the knuckles beneath the skin. She doesn't look up. Not in deference. Not the lowered gaze of performance or submission. In refusal. There's a difference, and Alaric knows it immediately. Deference is a gift. This is a boundary. He waits. Reaches, not consciously, but reflexively, the way you reach for the light switch in a familiar dark room. Nothing. The hall exists in soundless fragments around them. The distant crackle of a torch. The near inaudible shift of someone's weight 3 rows back. Someone swallowing too loudly and then hating themselves for it. Look at me. His voice is low. Controlled. The kind of voice that doesn't need volume, because volume has never been the source of its authority. She looks up. Their eyes meet. The contact should open something. It always does. The moment of direct regard. It acts like a key in most people, unlocking that immediate rush of unguarded signal, the desire beneath the composure flaring bright for just a second before being managed again. It doesn't. There's no rush beneath her skin. No tremor, no flicker, no warmth. Just her eyes, which are darker than he expected, holding his with an expression he cannot name because he has never encountered it before. His jaw tightens. Step forward. A ripple moves through the line. Barely contained. Someone exhales sharply. Someone else shifts weight and immediately stops moving, aware they've made a sound. She doesn't move. No one disobeys him here. Not like this. Not with that specific quality of stillness that reads less like hesitation and more like decision already made. Alaric steps closer. His shadow extends across the polished floor and falls into hers, the shapes merging at the edges under the chandelier's light. Everyone here reaches for something. His voice has dropped further, private enough to be almost intimate in its quietness. You don't. Her hands tighten.
Small. Fast.
Gone again before anyone but him catches it. I serve the crown, she says. 3 words. And what they don't say fills the space louder than anything they do.
Not you.
The crown. The institution. The concept.
Not you.
A few heads lift, barely, just enough to register what happened and what it means. Alaric doesn't look away from her. Then prove it. Silence answers him. Not hesitation. Not confusion. Not the trembling beat of someone trying to find words. Silence. The kind that doesn't bend. It stretches. Long enough that the room begins to breathe differently, that collective held breath of people waiting for something to break, someone to yield, the natural order to reassert itself. She doesn't break. Alaric studies her face. No defiance performing itself. No fear bleeding through composure. No plea hiding under stillness. Nothing he can take hold of. And the absence of it digs deeper into him than resistance ever has. He straightens. Slowly. With the careful deliberateness of someone aware that every movement is being read by 50 witnesses plus his own court instincts. He turns just enough for the room to feel the movement. Before dawn, he says, voice carrying now, cutting every corner of the hall, you will all stand here again. A murmur threatens to form, dies before it does. His gaze returns to her. You included. She doesn't answer, doesn't nod, doesn't arrange her face into acknowledgement. That lands harder than refusal. Alaric steps back. 1 step. Enough to widen the space between them. Not enough to release it. He turns away first. Not because the moment is finished. Because staying would expose the fracture forming under everything he thought he understood. He doesn't look back as he walks. But the absence follows him out of the grand hall of Valenmere.
Clings.
The specific quality of a question that has never once occurred to you suddenly occurring to you, fully formed, inescapable. Bootsteps echo behind him. Not one set. Several. Measured carefully. The controlled, cautious following of people who serve a king but are suddenly less certain where he's going. He reaches the corridor before anyone dares close the distance. The doors behind him shut. Stone meets stone. The sound travels farther than it should. Alaric keeps walking. The servants he passes react differently than they should. Heads lowering too quickly. Hands tightening around trays, cloths, anything that gives them reason not to look. Not the usual brisk deference. Something else. Distance being manufactured in real time. As if proximity, tonight, carries risk. Inside the grand hall, the line doesn't so much dissolve as fracture. Not all at once. In quiet increments, like ice cracking in spring, small separations that compound until the geometry is entirely changed. Eyes move. Not toward the doors where the king disappeared. Toward her. Leora Dane stands exactly where she stood. Same position. Same stillness. But the nature of that stillness has shifted. She is no longer simply a woman standing at the edge of a formation. She is the center. Not by choice. By mathematics. By the fact that something happened here that has never happened, and the hall is doing what it always does with unprecedented events, pressing toward the source, trying to understand it before understanding becomes dangerous. A woman in emerald silk steps half a pace closer to her neighbor. Voice lowered, too late to be private. She didn't react. The other woman doesn't answer. Keeps her gaze fixed on Leora. Not once. A third joins without invitation. No one fails that. The word choice is interesting.
Fails.
As if the expectation of response is a test, and response is the passing grade, and what Leora has done tonight is fail by succeeding at something no one understood was possible. Across the hall, another cluster forms around the same idea, finding it from a different direction. She could be trained. No one trains against that. Then what is she? The question doesn't need to rise above a whisper to spread. It moves fast or quiet. It moves through the hall like the thing it is. Not curiosity. Alarm. Leora shifts her weight.
Barely.
Just enough for the marble to catch a faint scrape. 3 heads turn at once. She stills again. The attention doesn't break. It tightens. A servant passing too close flinches before correcting himself. His shoulder nearly grazes hers. He stops short, too short, the overcorrection visible, and steps around her in an arc so deliberately wide it draws more eyes than contact would have. "Forgive me," he mutters. She watches him go, then lowers her gaze. Not to hide, to narrow, to the specific, focused attention of someone cataloging the behavior of a system that has just revealed how it classifies her. The doors of the council chamber close with a weight that has nothing to do with their physical mass. Inside, no silk, no perfume. Stone and wood and oil from the torches. The smell of decisions made, without ceremony. Lord Marcel Runvar doesn't sit immediately. He stands at the head of the table with his fingers resting lightly against its carved edge, gaze fixed on the closed doors as if he can still see through them, as if the image of what happened in the grand hall is still playing on the stone. "It failed," someone says. Not loudly. But no one in the room mistakes what it refers to. Marcel's eyes shift. Not toward the speaker. Toward the empty chair. Alaric's place. "It didn't fail," Marcel says. A pause. Careful. Deliberate. It stopped. The distinction settles across the room. Several people straighten, almost imperceptibly, the way you straighten when a statement reframes something you thought you understood. One counselor leans forward. "If it can be stopped. It can be used." Another finishes. Silence follows. Not agreement. Calculation. The particular silence of a room full of people running numbers behind careful faces. Marcel finally takes a seat. Slow. Deliberate. The full weight of decision-making settling into posture. "Or it can be hidden," he says. No one interrupts. Because that possibility sits heaviest of all. Harder to control than something stopped. Harder to predict than something used. His fingers tap once against the wood. Unpredictable variables don't remain inside Valimir. A glance moves around the table. Measured. Inclusive. The kind of glance that says we all understand this, don't we? No one argues. Because no one needs to. Leora pauses at the turn toward the eastern wing. The window there stands open. Wind presses through the narrow stone frame, carrying salt from the cliffs beyond the city. It catches the edge of her sleeve. Lifts it. Drops it again. She places her hand against the stone. Cold. Steady. For a moment, nothing moves. Not her, not the guards behind her, not the air between. She is thinking. You can see it in the specific quality of her stillness. Not the performance stillness of the grand hall, but the internal kind. The stillness of a mind running calculations so quickly the body has nothing left to animate. A step sounds behind her. Then another. Heavier. More certain. She doesn't turn. The presence stops just outside reach. Not close enough to touch. Close enough to decide. Orders will come before dawn. Low voice. Controlled. Not directed at her. Not entirely. The kind of statement delivered to a space, so that whoever is in it hears it. Leora's fingers press harder against the stone. A faint line of white forms at the tips. Behind her, the guards shift. Not forward. Not back. Ready. In the council chamber, Marcel's hand settles flat against the table. "Prepare it," he says. No one asks what. They already understand. The thing being prepared has a shape they all recognize. It has been used before. For other variables that became too unpredictable to remain in proximity to the throne. A chair scrapes softly as one counselor rises. How soon? Marcel doesn't hesitate. Before the king decides he cannot. The words don't echo. They don't need to. They settle into the chamber like a verdict already written, waiting only for delivery. At the window, Leora finally turns. Slow, deliberate. The guards meet her eyes this time. They don't look away. And that, more than the words behind her, more than the weight against the stone, more than the distant sound of metal shifting somewhere deeper in the palace, that changes everything. No hesitation. No uncertainty. Position. The corridor holds its breath. The metal sounds come closer now, not one door, but several, one after another, measured and coordinated. The guards at the far end shift first, not toward Leora,
Toward the sound.
their hands settle onto their weapons without drama, just the quiet finality of people who have been told what to do and are doing it. Leora remains near the eastern window. The wind presses against her sleeve, falls away. Her fingers rest at her sides now, no longer braced against the stone, but loose in a way that reads as either calm or readiness, and the difference between those two things is not visible from the outside. Council guards enter the corridor. Dark cloaks against pale stone. Perfect formation. Pace steady and unhurried enough to communicate that the outcome has already been decided, and this is merely its implementation. They don't look at the servants. They don't look at each other. They look at her. The distance shortens. The lead guard slows, just fractionally, to fall half a step ahead of the others. Positioned.
Prepared.
Leora doesn't step back. Hold. The word cuts through the corridor before it completes. A single syllable carrying the specific weight of a person who has never had to raise his voice to stop a room. Every head turns. King Alaric Vane stands at the far end, one hand resting lightly against the stone archway. He hasn't moved visibly fast. He's simply there, the way certain forces simply manifest when something requires them. The guards stop. Not because they hesitate, because they measure. The lead guard lowers his raised hand.
Slowly.
But doesn't step back. Alaric walks forward. Each footfall deliberate. Each one landing in silence and then giving the silence back. He doesn't look at the guards first. He looks at Leora. Checks, not with whatever reaches from him, and finds surfaces. With his eyes. The uncomplicated, human version of seeing. She hasn't moved. Hasn't broken. He crosses the distance until he stands between them. A line drawn in posture and intention, visible to everyone. Who gave the order? His voice stays low, private and public at once. The council. Not a name. A body. A decision larger than any one person in this corridor. Alaric's gaze shifts to the formation, takes in the geometry of it. The positioning that suggests containment without using the word. They move before I speak to them. They move because you haven't. The response lands clean. No apology in it. Not defiance, exactly, something more dangerous than defiance. A decision already accepted by the person making it. Silence. The wind finds the window again and moves through it. Cloaks shift at the hems. Fabric settles. Return to your posts. No one moves. The lead guard holds his ground. Our orders stand. The words carry the weight of the chamber beyond. Of men who anticipated this moment, prepared for it, decided in advance how to route around it. Alaric steps closer. Close enough that the guard has to adjust the angle of his chin by a fraction. I am your order. The kind of pause that stretches right up to the edge of something. Behind the lead guard, one of the other shifts. Not forward. Back. One step. Then another. The line wavers. Not fully, but enough. The geometry of perfect formation developing the first visible crack. The lead guard's jaw tightens. His grip firms. For a moment it holds. Then, he steps back. One pace. Just enough. Stand down, Alaric says. This time they do.
Slowly.
Reluctantly. Eyes still fixed and watching. Bodies cleared from the path, but spirits not yet surrendered. Alaric turns toward Leora. For a moment, neither speaks. The corridor narrows around them, dense with held breath and the retreating sound of boots. You shouldn't be here alone, he says. She doesn't answer. Her gaze moves once, to the guards now lining the wall, then back to him. Not questioning, not yielding, just present. The bell begins. Low, heavy measured, not rapid, never rapid. It marks time the way certain things mark time. Not frantic, just relentless. It doesn't ring fast. It doesn't need to. Alaric's head turns slightly toward it, then back. He knows what it signals. Every guard in this corridor knows. Every servant currently pretending to be invisible in doorways knows. The council is no longer waiting behind closed walls. Leora's fingers curl once at her side. Small, then still again. Alaric steps closer to her, not touching. Close enough that the space between them has become a specific thing, visible, with its own weight. You stay where I can see you, he says. It isn't shaped like a command, exactly. It doesn't have the clean edge of something intended purely as instruction. He turns before she answers, because he already knows she won't. Inside the war chamber, the silence is different. Not held, not fraught. Thinking silence. The kind that collects around people who are trying to understand something that doesn't want to be understood. Alaric stands at the war table. His fingers hover above the open dossier without touching it. Arinder Vale. The ink is older than the current court. Edges faded as if time itself tried to bleed the record dry. He reads the first page without absorbing it because he's reading it the way you read something when you're actually looking at the person across from you. The words landing as peripheral data while the central attention is elsewhere. He forces himself to focus. The Red Winter incident, he says. Quiet. Not a question. Leora doesn't correct him. That's the first weight. Not denial. Not defense. Just acceptance. The specific acceptance of someone who stopped arguing with a name long ago. The record is unlike any battlefield documentation he's encountered. Fragmented. Field notes cut with encrypted command codes. Witness accounts that don't align cleanly. Entire sections marked unverified due to memory contamination exposure. The narrative resists his attempt to impose linear logic on it. His eyes find a phrase repeated across multiple sections. Containment failure occurred after voluntary reallocation of protective wards.
Voluntary. He reads it again.
Voluntary doesn't belong in combat documentation. It belongs in testimony, in confession, in accounts of people who chose something when they didn't have to choose it. Further in, Arinder Vale Frontier, collapse attributed to internal restructuring of defensive protocols, initiated by single operative designation, Leora of the Outer Vale. Not commander, not general, operative. The ink beneath her designation is darker, pressed harder, as if the person writing it felt the weight of naming her and let it travel down through the quill. Alaric reads the pattern that the record makes instead of the record itself. Every decision attributed to her in the Red Winter cycle, withdrawal of protection from self-contained zones, rerouting evacuation priority away from high-value positions, the deliberate exposure of her own unit to stabilize civilian corridors. Every choice an inversion of survival logic. Every choice pointing the same direction. He exhales once. Low. Service over survival, he says. Not to her. Testing the phrase against reality, the way you test ice before you put weight on it. Leora moves. Barely. A shift of weight, so small it barely registers. But Alaric catches it. Because it isn't avoidance this time. It's memory responding to being named. The record continues. Subject refused extraction after full operational collapse. Declared mission continuity, essential despite personal compromise, threshold exceeded. He reads it twice. Personal compromise, threshold exceeded. What that phrase contains in its clinical language is a human being told to leave and refusing. You stayed, he says. The torch behind them hisses softly against its casing. Leora's voice comes at last.
Low.
Stripped of any decorative layer. I remained because leaving would have required choosing myself. The sentence lands without justification attached to it. Without apology. Without the softening language of someone trying to make a hard truth more palatable. That's what makes it heavier than explanation. The weight of something that was decided and never reconsidered. Alaric turns pages. He's no longer reading for information. He's reading for pattern. Every entry points toward the same absence. Reward never accepted. Commendation deflected. Recovery time refused. Every moment where recognition would have located her inside the system, given her an anchor, made her real to the institution in a way that could be leveraged for her own benefit. She steps away.
Consistently.
As if attachment itself is the danger. As if being seen too clearly would compromise something she's decided cannot be compromised. A thought forms in him, quiet and uncomfortable. The way she positioned herself in the grand hall. slightly off-axis, never directly facing authority, not fear,
Distance as discipline. He looks up from the dossier.
The realization arrives slowly, the way certain realizations do. Not as lightning but as dawn, light gathering from so many directions at once that you cannot say exactly when darkness ended. Leora isn't resisting him. She's maintaining a law that predates him. The Red Winter incident is the visible fracture point. It isn't the origin. At the bottom of the file, written in a different hand, older ink, sharper pressure, the penmanship of someone who chose their words very carefully and then pressed hard anyway. Post-incident behavioral directive, subject exhibits sustained emotional detachment as operational safeguard. Recommendation, no integration into command intimacy structures. No integration into command intimacy structures. He reads it twice. Then, once more. The third time, it stops feeling like recommendation and starts feeling like containment.
He closes the dossier.
The sound it makes is final in a way neither of them acknowledges aloud. What did you lose in Arinder Vale? A pause that is 2 seconds long and contains considerably more than 2 seconds. Leora's eyes don't move to him. They stay fixed somewhere beyond the table, beyond the chamber, beyond this moment. Everything that would have asked to be saved, she says. The words carry something. Almost emotion. Almost. Stop just before it fully forms. The specific quality of a person who has done this long enough that the interruption happens automatically, before conscious decision. Alaric feels it. That stopping. Not suppression. A trained interruption. A life lived perpetually at the threshold of becoming fully human, and never quite allowed to complete the crossing. The council's bell finds the chamber again. The sound doesn't break anything. It just reminds everything of its own weight. Alaric steps closer to the table. Closer to her. Not touching. Testing. He has tested the space around her before. He does it again now, but differently, not reaching for signal, watching behavior. The specific architecture of how she moves in response to him. Her foot slides back. Half an inch. No sound. No scrape. Just absence where it was before. He stills. That is not fear. Fear pulls sharp, fast, uncontrolled. This is measured. Precise. The exact amount of distance maintenance needed, and not a fraction more.
He moves again.
Closer. Testing the pattern. The corridor has condensed around them. Guards line the wall. The council presses from outside. Even Marcel, standing at the periphery, doesn't speak, just watches, jaw set, eyes calculating. Alaric stops just inside reach. Leora doesn't look away. But the space between them holds. Uncrossed. Unentered. As if there is an invisible boundary that she maintains not with effort but with practice, the way you maintain a habit long enough that it stops requiring conscious thought. He shifts his weight forward. Not enough to touch. Enough to close the last fraction. Her breath changes. Not deeper. Not faster. Held. Then released slowly. Controlled. Counted. Alaric's eyes narrow. He waits. The next bell doesn't break the silence. It folds into it. Behind him, a counselor takes a step. Stone against stone. Alaric doesn't turn. He looks back at Leora. At the precision. At the restraint. At the distance she refuses to let collapse. Not emptiness. Control. He steps back. Testing again. The distance opens. She doesn't reclaim it. Doesn't step forward. Doesn't relax into the expanded space. She holds exactly where she is. As if the distance itself matters. As if crossing it in either direction costs something that cannot be recovered. His jaw tightens. He looks at her hands. The angle of her shoulders. The way her gaze never drifts far from the edges of the room. Not searching for escape. Measuring boundaries. Avoiding contact. Not with bodies. With him. Alaric steps forward sharply, closing distance in a single motion. Forcing it. Leora's reaction comes instantly. Not a flinch. Not a recoil.
A shift. Clean. Precise.
She moves just enough to maintain the space, no more, no less. Her foot landing without sound, her body already still again before the motion fully registers as having happened. The room freezes. Even the guards feel it. That wasn't instinct. That was practiced. Alaric stops. The space between them remains. Unbroken. Unentered. He doesn't move again. Because now he isn't testing her. He's watching the pattern. And it doesn't break. Not once. Not under any pressure he applies. His voice lowers.
Who taught you that?
Leora doesn't answer, but her fingers tighten just once before stilling again. This time, he doesn't miss it, and the silence that follows doesn't feel like absence. It confirms something far more dangerous than absence. This was never something he failed to see. It was something built specifically not to be seen at all. The council envoys enter without announcing themselves. Their boots strike the floor in controlled rhythm that feels forced, discipline barely containing alarm pretending to be procedure. Alaric doesn't turn immediately. He keeps his focus on Leora, as if moving his attention would allow reality to slip sideways into something manageable. Then the first envoy speaks. The council has reviewed the Arinder Vale dossier. The words land too cleanly, prepared, long before tonight. Alaric finally turns. The envoys don't look at Leora. They look at him. That's the shift. Not accusation yet, classification. A quiet reclassification happening in real time, visible if you know how to watch for it. The containment anomaly associated with Operative Leora has been escalated, the second envoy says. Intervention protocols are now under consideration. The chamber feels narrower. Not physically, socially. Structurally. As if walls are forming out of judgment instead of stone. Intervention, Alaric repeats. Testing the word for its true weight. One envoy nods. Precisely once. Psychological compliance review. Operational restriction. Possible detachment from royal proximity assignments. Leora doesn't react. Alaric sees it now. The smallest shift in her stillness. Not fear. Not surprise. Anticipation of containment. As if she has heard variations of this sentence before. As if it is simply another cycle completing itself on schedule. Alaric steps forward, breaking the triangle of council and subject. That is not procedure. Your Majesty. The first envoy careful, precise. Her behavioral record indicates sustained detachment patterns inconsistent with emotional integration protocols required for proximity advisory roles. Proximity advisory roles. The euphemism sits there. Alaric hears what it covers immediately. They are not discussing safety. They are discussing access. His gaze flicks to Leora. She stands exactly as before. Hands still. Shoulders level. Eyes neither pleading nor resisting. Present in that controlled way that has become its own kind of statement. That absence is what they're afraid of. Not what she's done. What cannot be read in her. The moral fracture is forming. Alaric can feel it beneath everything. The fault line between control and truth, and he is standing directly on it. I will review it myself, he says. The envoy's expression tightens. With respect, this falls under council jurisdiction until I am no longer king? Silence. Real this time. Even Leora's stillness deepens, not reacting, but registering the direction of escalation with the focused attention of someone taking navigation readings. That is not what we are suggesting, but the suggestion lives in the structure of every sentence they've spoken. A slow transfer of judgment from throne to chamber. Procedural. Quiet. Inevitable unless interrupted. And Leora is becoming the justification. Alaric exhales once. Leave us. They hesitate. Not because they disobey. Because the command isolates something they were trying to keep under shared scrutiny. Removes the council's watching from the equation. After a moment they bow. They withdraw. The doors close. The sound is heavier than before. Privacy. Changed silence. Alaric doesn't speak immediately. Neither does Leora. A draft moves through stone seams. Torchlight trembles, distorting shadows across the war table. Across the closed dossier. He turns fully toward her. Not as king to subject. As something more uncertain. Something searching. You knew this would happen, he says. Not accusation. Recognition. The awareness that he's arrived late to an understanding she reached much earlier. I calculated the probability, she says. Of course she did. That answer should make this easier. It doesn't. Because calculation implies acceptance of outcome, not avoidance of it. And she's still here. Still within reach of the very escalation, she calculated. He places both hands on the table edge. Cold. Grounding. I am not a variable in your calculation, he says. A pause. Her gaze drops briefly to the closed dossier. Returns. You are the only variable I cannot stabilize. That sentence lands differently than anything she said before. Not emotional. Structural. A system acknowledging the failure point it cannot resolve. Something tightens in Alaric's chest. Not sentiment. Responsibility colliding with authority. Because if she is unstable around him, then keeping her close isn't protection. It's risk. And he is the source of that risk. His hand shifts on the table edge. Not reaching. Not retreating. Suspended. The decision's space narrows. If he delays, the council acts without him. If he acts, he validates their authority. If he defends her, he weakens his position. If he yields, he loses something he hasn't yet named. Leora watches him. Not pleading. Not resisting. Observing. The exact moment where control begins to fracture into moral cost. And in that observation, something sharper surfaces. This isn't about her danger. It's about what she reveals about him. About proximity. About unreadability. About the fear that even the king, especially the king, cannot interpret what stands closest to him. His voice lowers. What did they do to you after Arinder Vale? A pause. Barely a breath longer than normal. Something sealed begins to loosen. Not fully. Not yet. But enough. Alaric's hand remains suspended above the threshold of command. Close enough to enforce. Close enough to end uncertainty. Leora's silence doesn't break. It holds. And in that holding, in the specific quality of it, the texture of a silence that has been maintained across years rather than minutes, something in him begins to misalign. Not emotionally. Structurally. As if the foundation of how he understands certainty is being tested and found to be thinner than he thought. The torch along the wall flickers. His shadow distorts for a moment at the edge, briefly not matching his posture, and then corrects. He lowers his hand. Away from command. Not retreat. Recalibration. The action is minimal. Nearly invisible. Leora notices immediately. The small adjustment of attention, the nearly imperceptible recalculation of what the space between them now means. His ability pulses automatic, habitual, the reach towards signal that has been so constant across his life it doesn't require intention. He stops it. The small internal refusal feels louder than any command he's issued. You are still unreadable. It should sound like accusation. It doesn't. It sounds like uncertainty he is no longer able to conceal from himself. Leora's gaze shifts toward him. Not softening. Not hardening. Adjusting. As if she's deciding whether what he said is even accurate anymore. That hesitation, barely a breath longer than usual, barely a fraction past controlled, is the fracture point. She almost reacts. Stops herself. The suppression is deliberate. Visible if you know what to look for. And suddenly Alaric knows what to look for. His ability doesn't read truth. The thought enters his mind the way a key enters a lock that has been there the entire time. Not force, just the right shape. It never did. It reads desire. Desire was always the strongest resonance. He never questioned why. Because it worked. Because desire is the loudest thing most people broadcast. But it isn't truth. It's exposure. Voluntary exposure. What is perceived isn't what is real. It's what hasn't been managed away. You knew, he says. The silence is intentional. I adapted, she says. Not confession. Not defense. Engineering. His fingers flex involuntarily at his side. The implication doesn't just challenge authority. It invalidates the mechanism behind it. If desire can be suppressed, then what he has been calling certainty is only the surface that other people failed to control. Not truth. Unmanaged exposure. The chamber feels colder, though nothing in the environment has changed. Perception shifts temperature when meaning collapses. Then everything I have judged. He stops. Because completing the sentence gives it consequences he isn't ready to hold. Leora watches him now more directly than before. Not approaching. Not retreating. Present in a way that feels heavier than motion. You have been reading surface signal, she says. Quietly. No judgment. Only clarification. That's worse. Because it removes emotional justification. It is an accusation. It's correction. Authority doesn't fracture loudly. It erodes in silence. One assumption at a time. The thought expands. His ascension training, the explanation of his ability, emotional resonance detection, stabilized through proximity exposure. Not truth. Not thought. Not intent. Resonance. Always resonance. He just never asked why the resonance felt like certainty. Because it worked. Until it didn't. If Leora suppresses desire, she isn't unreadable. She is actively rewritten. The council's fear crystallizes into sudden sharp sense. Not fear of her instability. Fear of her control over visibility itself. Fear of someone who can decide what the system is allowed to perceive. He lifts his eyes back to her. For the first time, he is genuinely uncertain what he is seeing. That uncertainty is new, unacceptable, and for the first time, something beyond unacceptable.
Real.
Leora steps slightly closer to the table. Not into his space, into shared visual range of the closed dossier. You were never meant to read truth, she says. The words are calm. They strike harder than accusation because they suggest limitation. Built-in limitation. The kind that was always there in the architecture, just not named until now. If his ability isn't truth-seeing, then what is he? Outside, footsteps echo, council movement resuming its pattern. Closer than before. The countdown is tightening. Alaric becomes aware of something else. If they proceed, they will not only evaluate her, they will evaluate him. The king who may not see what he believes he sees. His gaze returns to Leora. Slower this time. Deliberate. Searching not for desire but for the absence of it. And realizing, with a discomfort that settles in and doesn't move, absence is not what he's witnessing. Control is. Intentional control over what can be perceived. The truth was never missing. It was managed. The council's footsteps tighten outside. Alaric's hand hovers once more, not toward command, toward the realization that command itself may be built on a broken system. And then Leora speaks, not with defense, not with denial, with truth. I did not remove my desires. The words are soft. They fracture the air around them the way a hairline crack fractures glass, invisible until the light catches it, and then impossible to unsee. Alaric's gaze sharpens instantly. She continues, eyes steady, distant in a way that no longer feels like emptiness. I buried them where no reading system, yours or theirs, could extract them. A pause. Then, quieter. Because I could not afford for anyone to know what I felt. The chamber tightens. Not metaphorically. Structurally. As if the revelation forces space itself to adjust. You are saying you had desire. Leora doesn't look away. I still do. Silence. Not long. Absolute. Even the torchlight seems to hesitate. A moment of undifferentiated stillness where the chamber decides what to do with what just happened. Alaric feels something shift behind his ribs. Not emotion, destabilization. The system he built his authority on losing structural certainty. If desire can be hidden, then truth has never been visible. Only permitted. Only exposure. His fingers curl slightly, involuntarily. He has been reading a version of people curated by their own survival instinct. Not essence. Not truth. Curated output. The version of themselves they failed to control. Her voice continues, quieter, but no less precise. If I allowed it to surface, I would lose control. And if I lost control, she pauses, not for effect but as if choosing between words. I would become vulnerable in ways I cannot afford near you. The last two words land differently. Near you. Not the throne. Not the council. Him. Alaric takes a slow step back. Not retreat. Recalibration. His ability pulses the instinctive reach for signal, and for the first time he doesn't follow it. He stops it. That small internal refusal feels like stepping off a cliff. The council outside shifts again. Closer. Their timeline tightening. Intervention window narrowing. If he calls them in, this ends. If he allows them entry, she becomes their case. If he stops them, he becomes something else entirely. Alaric exhales. And does something no system in the kingdom predicts. He lowers his hand fully. Away from command. Away from power. The gesture is small. Leora notices immediately. Not with surprise. With recalibration. The rapid recalculation of someone whose model of a person just changed. You will not use it, she says. Confirmation. Not question. Alaric doesn't answer immediately. The weight of the choice settling into his posture like gravity changing direction. Outside, footsteps halt. The moment of enforcement has passed. Something irreversible has replaced it.
No.
The word is simple. It breaks something foundational in the chamber. Not loudly, quietly. The way structure gives way under decision instead of force. The council does not accept this gracefully. They never do when certainty collapses. The corridor beyond the chamber feels colder. Every echo of Alaric's footsteps lands differently now. Not authority, not command. Question. Behind him, Leora follows without hesitation. That, too, is noticed. By the time he reaches the outer hall of governance, the envoys are gathered, not formally summoned, assembled through accelerated alarm. Their posture tight, not deferential. Corrective. The council has initiated emergency review of royal perceptual reliability. The phrase lands exactly where it is intended. Perceptual reliability. He hears what it contains. Not question. Not concern. Challenge. Following deviation from containment protocol regarding subject Leora, questions have been raised regarding the stability of your interpretive authority. A second envoy adds, careful and quiet. Temporary override measures are under consideration. Override. Not request. Not consultation. Replacement. Leora stands beside him. Not shielded. Not hidden. Exposed in proximity. That is what the council cannot tolerate. Subject Leora's presence continues to correlate with measurable instability in royal decision consistency, one envoy says. She is now considered a destabilizing influence vector. She doesn't react to the label. That absence of reaction becomes its own form of evidence. You are reclassifying her, Alaric says. The envoy doesn't deny it. We are protecting systemic integrity. Systemic integrity. The phrase that erases responsibility by dissolving it into structure. He believed in it once. He can hear its mechanics clearly now. Leora speaks, her voice level. I am not the instability. Not defense. Correction. We are not evaluating intent. We are evaluating system impact. Alaric understands. They are no longer disputing her behavior. They are disputing his judgment for allowing her proximity at all. And now his judgment is the subject of review. The king who may not see what he believes he sees. I will not accept override measures, he says. The envoys exchange a glance. Not surprise. Confirmation. This was expected, modeled, prepared for. Then the council must escalate containment authority. The implication completes itself without being spoken, containment of her, or limitation of him. The palace around them feels alive now with spreading interpretation. Guards repositioning. Messengers moving faster. The system recalculating leadership stability in real time. Alaric feels it. The throne is no longer distant. It is under review. And Leora. Leora is now the focal variable of an institution's fear. Not because she changed, but because she revealed that he might. One breath. A single moment where no one speaks. It feels longer than it is. Alaric turns toward her. And for the first time since everything began fracturing, he isn't trying to read her. He sees her. Not through signal. Not through interpretation. Not through the mechanism that has been the infrastructure of his authority for 11 years. Through presence. Without the system between them, there is no distortion left to hide what has always been there. Her stillness is not absence. It is restraint. And beneath it, carefully held for longer than any record admits, contained behind years of deliberate practice and the specific discipline of someone who decided they could not afford to be readable, is something that doesn't behave like instability at all. It behaves like attachment held under permanent suppression, like desire that was never removed, only buried. You didn't remove it, he says. Leora's eyes don't change, but something inside them tightens. The precise internal shift of something acknowledging it has been seen. I contained it, she says. Correction. Not denial. The silence that follows is long enough to reorder itself into something else. Something more honest than anything that preceded it. Alaric finally speaks, his voice quiet in a way that has nothing to do with volume. If I am wrong about you, he says, then I lose everything that made me certain of anything. The admission is not weakness. It is cost acknowledgement. Leora's expression doesn't soften, but her stillness changes, so slight it almost disappears. Like a burden acknowledged, but not lifted. I know, he says.
And it is not authority speaking.
It is recognition. Outside, the council prepares its formal challenge. Inside, nothing is resolved, only revealed. And behind him, Leora remains where she is. Not behind him, not beside him, simply there. Both of their shadows falling against stone, no longer aligned in hierarchy, no longer cleanly separated, just overlapping enough to be dangerous to interpret. The corridor light flickers. The king stands without the only certainty system he has ever trusted. And Leora, carefully held, quietly present, unresolved in every official sense, is seen for the first time by the one person she was certain she had hidden from completely. And there is no protocol for this. No procedure. No classification. No file in any chamber that accounts for what happens when the man who can read every woman's desire decides, finally, that seeing her matters more than what he can read from her. What happens when a king who cannot trust his power must still rule those who can deceive him? The answer isn't in the throne room. It isn't in the dossiers. It isn't in Marcel Renvar's careful calculations or the council's procedural override. The answer is forming in the specific quality of silence between two people standing in a corridor where the torchlight is uncertain and the morning is still coming. And neither of them is moving away. Thanks for watching. If this story pulled you in, there's more waiting for you. Tap the thumbnail on your screen to continue the journey. And if you felt something while watching, don't just scroll away. Drop a like, leave a comment, and let your voice be part of the Alpha King dynasty. Your support keeps the story alive.